Christian nationalism has been a hot button issue for the last few years, and I thought I would talk a bit about it. So, for starters, I don't think this issue became such a hot button issue because of Christians. It became such a hot button issue because of secular people. It really goes back to like the new atheist movement back in the 2000s. A lot of them were saying that we've got to stop Christianity because Christianity is going to make America into like this fascist country, and the Christians are going to take away all our rights and this and that. And then, kind of the secular leftist movement of today really comes up out of new atheism, and they take this idea and they run with it. And if you keep up with any secular media, especially secular left-wing media, you would think that America is only like 5 minutes away from becoming a Christian, theocracy. They often paint it like Christians are going to rise up and take away all our rights. We're going to live in the Handmaid's Tale, and Christians are going to oppress everybody and this and that. And it really is, I think it's mostly projection, because the people who are actually doing all the things that they're claiming the Christian nationalists are doing, trying to take over our country and take away everybody's rights and make everybody like them, though there are some Christians that would do that if they had the power, the people who are really doing that are the secular leftists, and I think it's mostly projection. Then I do think it's intentional boogeymanning, trying to make Christianity look more scary, because they realize that really the only cultural force in America that could counteract secular leftism is Christianity, because we are still nominally a Christian nation in some sense. So I think it's mostly a form of projection and also an intentional scare tactic to get people to, be afraid of Christians whenever they try to get involved on any issue, because they want to discredit Christianity and they want to gain more power for themselves. So that's why I think Christian nationalism has become such a big deal. It's not really because of Christians, it's because of secular people. And however, I have noticed mostly in reaction to it, mostly because our country has gotten more crazy. So I think a lot of Christians are actually starting to take the idea of Christian nationalism more seriously. And they're trying to make it where America is officially a Christian nation. And I think that's really a solution. So there's different understandings of what exactly Christian nationalism means. I think most Christians would agree that they want their nation to be a Christian country. But what exactly that means depends on the person. So you have some people that are like, America should be like a Catholic nation ran by the Pope, or that America, and on another group of radical extremists would be like people that want America to follow the Mosaic Law and live by the Torah. And then, of course, you would have more moderate people that are like, America, we should have a state church, kind of like how England has the Church of England. And then you had people that are like, we should be an officially Christian nation, like maybe have like an amendment to our Constitution officially declaring America a Christian nation, but having no official state church. And then kind of on the most moderate end of it, you would just say that we want America to be a Christian nation, to the sense that most people in America are Christian, and we believe in Christian values. And of course, believing in Christian values, we do bring that into politics, but we're not officially a Christian nation in any legal sense. And those are kind of the different views of Christian nationalism. And for starters, I guess I'll give my 2 cents really on the matter. And that is that I think that focusing so much on America, the greater nation, the federal union, it's really missing the goalpost here. You really shouldn't be focusing on America, the giant country of, millions and millions of people, thousands of miles wide. You really shouldn't be focusing on that. You should be focusing on the states. When America was founded, the reason why we don't really have a state church in America, or the fact that our Constitution really tells us that America, the Congress shall not make a law establishing religion or prohibiting it, is because really religion was a matter handled by the states. When the country was founded, it was understood the states would be more powerful than the federal government. And, when America was founded, it was like 7 of the states were Anglican, and 3 of the states were Congregationalist. And every state dealt with religion in its own way. And the founders understood that, so they let the states handle religious issues. And I think that's how it should be today. America is a very big country, and I think trying to force one brand of Christianity or one Christian idea on all of America, I think is a terrible idea, because we're such a huge country. I really do think that it's wise to focus on the states and to focus on states' issues. Christianity, I think people here in North Carolina know what's best for our religious interests when it comes to that kind of thing, and how we should handle religion and Christianity should be best handled by us and not by people in other states. And I think it's really true of any state. I think that the states have the rights on these matters. Like if tomorrow the state of Nebraska wanted to declare itself an officially Islamic nation, I think, even though, of course, I vehemently disagree with that, I think that Nebraska would have the right to do that as long as it does not infringe on the Bill of Rights. And, of course, I think that's very unlikely to happen. I don't think Nebraska is going to be becoming an Islamic nation anytime soon, but that was just an example. And I really do think that it's really a matter of the states. For instance, like in more recent issues, like I've noticed that Louisiana and Oklahoma have tried to like get the Ten Commandments put back in public schools. I think that's a right that the state of Louisiana and the state of Oklahoma have, and I don't think the federal government should tell them to do otherwise. I think that they have the right to do that, and if that's what the people of Louisiana want, I don't think that people in other parts of the country should be able to tell them they can't do that. I think really the state should govern themselves with moderate federal oversight, which what the country was intended to be. But of course, I'm going to say that I'm a Southerner. We're kind of known for that. But, you know, that's kind of my view. I think it really should be a state issue. I think trying to make it where the entirety of America will follow one form of Christianity or one way of thinking about it is a terrible idea because our country is so huge and different areas of America approach religion in different ways. So I think it'd be wise just to leave it up to the states. And that goes with really a lot of issues. In all the Christian issues like education, I think that should be left open to the states too. I think the states should have a lot more power over how curriculums are decided. And even we should have public schools at all, and maybe go over to like a voucher system. You know, maybe do that. I think that really is more of a states issue than a federal issue. And that's how I feel about this whole Christian nationalism thing. Is a states issue, not a federal issue. And maybe even not just a states issue, because some states are really big, like California or Texas. Those are huge states. Maybe even it should be even more on a local level than that. But I really do think it should, at the very least, should be a states issue. And that's honestly kind of my opinion. I would prefer Christian. When it comes to my actual thoughts, I do think it's a matter of the states, and I think the states can do what they want on it. But my honest opinion on how exactly should Christians want America to be a Christian nation, I think we should want America to be a Christian nation inside the more moderate sense that America should be a Christian nation, so the sense that most people in America are Christian, and we try to be a Christian society. You know, the church should be. One of my biggest problems with Christian nationalism is that there's so many issues inside the church right now that getting the church intertwined with the government is only going to make things worse. Like, there are so many problems inside the church that need to be fixed. You know, once we get the church reformed, I think we can start talking about reforming the government. But the church really needs to be reformed first. And I think there's a lot of issues inside the church to be dealt with. And I do think that really America should be a Christian nation, but inside the sense that most people in America are Christian, and of course, we have to, at some extent, bring our religion into politics. I think that's kind of inevitable. I mean, as Christians, you know, I think there's just some things we would have to bring into politics eventually. So one thing I'm not too much opposed to is the idea of an explicitly Christian political party. I know some nations in Europe have that kind of thing going. Of course, I do think that the problem with the Christian political party is that it might taint the reputation of Christianity, and it probably cause a bunch of division in Christian circles. But that's one idea that I don't think would infringe too much on how America has traditionally understood the relationship between church and state. I wouldn't be too opposed to the idea of a Christian amendment, though I do think it would be best not to change the Constitution. This has been around since the time of the Civil War, but there's been an amendment floating around for a very long time called the Christian Amendment that would rewrite the preamble to the Constitution to make America officially a Christian country dedicated to Jesus Christ, but it would not establish any official state church. And there would be exceptions for citizens who were not Christian. I think maybe that's not a half bad idea. But that's as far as I'd be willing to go on the whole Christian nationalism, a very vague acknowledgement of Christ. But honestly, it's not so crazy because like nations like Australia have that. Australia is like, even though Australia is ironically now a minority Christian country, is like officially dedicated to Jesus Christ inside their constitution or something like that. But even then, I think that's maybe getting too involved with the government. I really do think that we should just leave the Constitution alone. I think it's fine as is. I think we understand that this is really a matter of the states and not of the federal government. I think that would work just fine. I don't think the Constitution needs to be tampered with. I think it's fine as is. And I don't think we need to make America officially some kind of theocracy. Honestly, I think that's one of the strengths of America religiously. Like, one of the biggest differences between America and Europe when it came to Christianity is in Europe, they believed in Christendom. Christianity was very intertwined with the state. The reason why like heresy trials were so brutal back in the Middle Ages was that the government and the church were intertwined. So if you were a heretic, you were also guilty of treason. That's why those things were intertwined. And in Europe, it was really, they believed in Christendom. So as a baby, you'd be baptized and brought into the church, but also you were kind of brought into the nation. And every European nation had the state church. If they're a Protestant country, they had an official Protestant state church, and then the Catholic countries would be officially Catholic. And they all had the state churches and the state religions, and they were heavily intertwined with the government. And I think one of the great strengths of America is that we believe in Christianity. In America, we've always been a Christian nation, but the churches that Americans have gone to have radically changed over the years. And America really is a marketplace of religion. America, it was always a lot more about, it wasn't so much about being a part of Christendom, it's about being a Christian, about going to the church that you believed in and not being forced to be a part of another church. And, it was really about going to the church that you believe in. And that's always been kind of an American value, and especially as a Universalist. One of the reasons I am opposed to Christian nationalism, to be honest, is self-serving. I'm not going to lie. I'm a Universalist, which means that to most Christians, I am considered a heretic. And that means that even though I'm a Christian, they would treat me like they would a Muslim or a Jew or an atheist under a Christian nationalist state, because I'd be a heretic. They might even treat me worse, because they would see me as trying to destroy, the Christian nation. At least with a Jew, they're not a Christian. They're not trying to destroy the Christian nation. There's something separate. But as a heretic to them, they might go even harsher against me. There's a very long history of persecuting heretics in Europe with the Christendoms. And I definitely do think, just look at the Universalist tradition. I mean, the Universalists, of course, famously were barred from being able to serve like in juries on courts because people believed that Universalists were inherently immoral. And Universalists have always been very much opposed to the idea of the church and the government to be mixed together. I mean, one of the things that really set in motion the idea of freedom of religion in America is the Universalist. We get like John Murray up there in Glasgow, Massachusetts. He had a congregation, and they just refused to pay taxes because in those days, Massachusetts wasn't officially a Puritan state. The Congregational Church was the official state church, so people had to pay taxes to it. And of course, the church in Massachusetts was Calvinist, and they refused to pay taxes to the Calvinist church because it taught hellfire. And being Universalists, they didn't believe in that, so they didn't want to pay taxes to it. And eventually, we actually won inside the Supreme Court of Massachusetts. We actually won, and actually, for the time, they actually were allowing where the Universalist church would also be able to receive tax dollars. Forgive the dogs in the background, but yeah, they would be able to receive tax dollars as well. And of course, they eventually did away with that whole thing. I think it was 1832. Massachusetts officially ditched its state church. But, the Universalists, we've always kind of been believers in religious freedom because we always were persecuted in the history of America. And of course, Universalists, we've always been a big tent religious tradition. So there's always been a lot of freedom of thought, freedom of religion inside our tradition. It's always been a big tent tradition. Of course, you can't believe whatever you want. I think that's really what distinguishes Christian Universalism from Unitarian Universalism. Inside Christian Universalism, inside the Christian traditional Christian Universalist tradition, there are limits to what you can believe with the Winchester profession and whatnot. It's a very broad tent, but there are still limits to what you can believe. Meanwhile, inside the UU today, you can believe whatever you want. And that's really the difference between classical Christian Universalism and Unitarian Universalism. In the UU, you can believe whatever you want. Meanwhile, inside traditional Christian Universalism, there are limits. Universalists, we've always just been believers like in freedom of religion. You should be able to go to what church you want. You shouldn't be forced to pay tax money to a church that preaches hellfire. And of course, there's a long history of persecution of Universalists, of course, being barred from juries. Many Universalists were persecuted, especially in the earlier days of America. So as Universalists, we've always been very much opposed to the mixing of government and religion. And that's very much how I feel about it. I definitely do lean more towards we shouldn't be officially Christian. I would say on matters of schooling, I do think that maybe a voucher system would be a good idea. I think that every Christian family should have the ability to give their children a Christian education if they so desire. That doesn't mean they have to, but I mean, I definitely think that if a family wants to send their children to a Christian school or give them some kind of Christian education, I think that should be an option. And I think that should be an option. I think that if parents want to give their family a religious education, I think they should be able to do that. Of course, there are downsides to Christian education. I went to a Christian school for some time. Some of them can definitely be atheist factories. But I do think that religion should be, in some sense, taught in public schools. Like math, I despise algebra and math. Like high school math, if you want to do it as an elective, fine. But I definitely don't think it should be mandatory. Honestly, I think that advanced algebra and all that should just be replaced by Greek philosophy, because a lot of it's just, all this originally was come up by Greek philosophers, and they like to say, oh, we're teaching them problem solving and abstract thinking. Well, why not just teach them philosophy? And I do think that religion should be taught in schools to some extent. Maybe not explicit. Like there should be options on religion and philosophy in school. I definitely think we should teach our children philosophy in public schools. And I do think that there should be optional classes on religion at the very least. And that's just kind of my thoughts. But, I do think that there should be greater ability for Christian families to be able to give their children Christian educations if they desire. But I do try to stay out of officially being involved with the government. I don't like the idea of a state church in America. I don't like the idea of my tax dollars going to a church that I disagree with. I really don't like that. I don't like the idea of, the government prosecuting me on heresy trial because I disagree with the established state church. I just don't like the idea of Christians being too involved with the government. Because I think also, like, a lot of people, it's like, oh, why would I want to be a Christian? They're a part of the establishment. They're with the church. They're with the government. Why would I want to be a Christian? I don't know. I just feel like it hurts Christianity more than it helps Christianity to be officially a part of the government. Though I do think that Christians do have a role to play in politics, but that we shouldn't make the government explicitly Christian. Those are my thoughts. If you disagree with me, fine. But y'all have a good day. God bless. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and Christ will conquer.